today's session is Lessons for Leaders. Last year we started a series of conversations with industry practitioners on different emerging topics to share their experiences, what's happening in the organizations, what are the challenges and opportunities they are forecasting, and finding solutions. So the platform will be open to all of you to ask questions today. And inshallah, we will have an open, candid conversation with these HR professionals. Thank you very much for joining the panelists. Now I would like to invite Mr. Farhan Ahmed, who is the President of the Alumni Association, to host the session, please. Mr. Farhan Ahmed. He is from one of the first batches. He has been associated with this institute and he is working as Head of Corporate Communication at Standard Chartered Bank. Farhan Ahmed.
Very much. Assalamu alaikum everybody. Welcome to this. Welcome to all the guests, to all the participants, to all. Thank you on behalf of the Alumni Association, for all the panelists, for taking their time out. So it's like that. So just to briefly give everybody an update on the Alumni Association was formed some time ago, but we had a very structured dialogue with the administration, and based on that we set out to really rebuild the association and reconnect everybody in the alumni. We're very proud of the fact that we have more than 8,000 alumni at this point in time who are actively placed around the world. They're globally, they're placed in the Americas, they're in the UAE, they're in different parts of the world, including what we're doing as an alumni association is trying to connect the bridge the relationship and bring those people to come back and help not only students but also the institute to take it to the next level. So some of the things that we've done is that on the 30th of November, we formally inaugurated the new IoBM Alumni office at the premises. It's right beside this place, where we have, which is ably Kamran and his team, where alumni can come in and get information regarding what are the things that we're doing, what activities we're doing. So we've planned a calendar of activities that we have. Some of the ones that notable ones are, we've got a very active IoBM cycling club. So one of the initiatives that we're really supporting on campus is the Grow Green initiative. The campus is trying to promote green activities, and the cycling club is one of the starting points of that. We've had 3 sessions of the cycling club, attended with more than 100 cyclists joining us every month for a ride. We actually have one tomorrow as well. Our partner in this is Tufel Chemicals, who have just associated themselves with the cycling rides. They've been kind enough to sponsor 100 cycles for campus that the students will have, so that they can commute on the campus as well. So the Green Initiative or the Green Campus Initiative is something that we're very actively promoting at IoBM. And another very interesting thing is that 2020 marks the 25th year of IoBM. So as a university, IoBM is 25 years old, and we're looking to this year to really actively engage the alumni who are there around the world. So one of the things that we have planned for this year is that we will have active alumni reunions, not just across Karachi, Lahore and Islamabad, but across our different other chapters as well, which includes the Far East, Europe, North America, as well as the GCC countries. So this is an opportunity for all of you to also reach out to people who you know who have graduated from IoBM and kind of bring them into the fold and say that yes, now we are really wanting to take the university to a different level. As you can see the infrastructure, the facilities, the curriculums, that is all very modern and very high tech. And I think we are nothing less than any state-of-the-art university in this part of the region. The country, I'm pretty sure we're much better than a lot, but in this part of the region, we stand very good. So I think those are some of the things that we're looking at for the alumni, from the alumni perspective. And I'd really encourage everybody to help us with the outreach and help us with connecting the alumni back to the institution. So any help from all of you would really be appreciated. Now a little about Lessons for Leaders. So Lessons for Leaders, we've I think had about 3 sessions, Kamran? We've had 3 different sessions where we've talked about networking, we've talked about media relationships, we've talked about civic responsibilities, where we had Mr. Mapara coming in and speaking. So this is the 4th session for Lessons for Leaders. Once again, thank you very much to all our panel. What we'll do is we've got 2 sessions that we will. The first session will be a moderated talk with Mr. Shakeel, where Mr. Shakeel Mapara will have a conversation with Ms. Asma Balal, who's the country director of Mary Stopes. After that, we will do a larger panel conversation around the topic, which is learning and development opportunities. All right. So with that, I would like to invite Shakeel and Ms. Asma Balal to please to have the first set of dialogue.
Everybody can hear this? Yes, I think the mic is okay. So good afternoon to everyone. And I know it's a very tough session, especially after the lunch that they always say, because it's a Saturday afternoon, almost into a weekend, and here we are talking about learning and development. So let's enlighten the audience. Ms. Asma Balal, you're now looking after Mary Stopes, and I'm sure it's another challenging organization because NGOs are not easy to basically handle, and how you can train those people. You don't find those trained people. So what's your opening thought on learning and development and the challenges and opportunities as a whole?
Thank you, Shakeel. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here today. I think you're right, Shakeel, that in terms of the development sector, there are certain specific challenges that are unique to the sector. Just to step back and briefly talk about our organization, for example, Mary Stopes Society is a social enterprise, and we are providing reproductive health service delivery throughout the country. Because most of the projects are in the underserved areas, they are primarily donor funded by different multilateral and bilateral donors. So with that backdrop, when it comes to sourcing talent, sometimes there are challenges in terms of competing with the private sector. For example, our packages sometimes may not be very competitive. However, I think in the context of sort of learning and development, I would say that our employee retention rate is exceptionally high, and people who come to work with us, they stay with us. And I think the main reason there is that we put a lot of emphasis on employee engagement, and we provide a nurturing environment. So people who joined us, at a certain level, they are given opportunities for growth, both by way of formal training, but that's only a small part of it. There are a lot of opportunities within the organization where people are nurtured to move on to the next level. There are a number of strategies for that, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I think if employees know that the employer cares for them, and there are opportunities for them to develop and grow, and they have a career path, they have a future, and very importantly, they believe in the cause that the organization stands for. In our case, we are in the business of saving mothers' lives. And if we can create that ownership with our mission, with our vision among the employees, then that's a big pull that sometimes compensates for, maybe sort of not very competitive packages.
Thanks a lot. I think that brings me to two other questions. One is that, of course, you said, you see, it's a myth that you need to have these classroom training sessions all the time. That's development. But like you said, they're nurture, and that is equally development and kind of a learning for the people. What kind of challenges do you face actually while nurturing people or keeping people in such an organization? Because of course you said people should join with their passion. So what kind of challenges have you been facing? Is it different or is it the same? And is it changing with youngsters joining the kind of what do you call it, private companies?
I think a lot of challenges are probably the same that you would come across in other sectors as well. In terms of the challenges, I think, yes, for a development sector organization, our biggest challenge sometimes is the availability of funds. But also, as you can imagine, there is a lot of contractual staff that joins us. So there is project-based hiring, and then there are people who have been with us. So sometimes there is a disconnect between the two sets of employees, and how do you make sure that you still sort of motivate them to work as one team? What we have, in my experience, I think when it comes to grooming managers or department heads or functional heads, core competencies is one thing which you can perhaps strengthen by formal training or more traditional methods of training. That's the skill set. But it is the behavioral training that we place a lot of emphasis on. So for example, people who are moving into more senior roles where they have responsibilities of managing a team, we very specifically and consciously work on developing several indicators that fall under the emotional quotient. We encourage them and nurture them and bring in behavioral coaches even at times to develop a lot of self-awareness, to develop introspection, and to do sort of a reflection on their different key leadership behaviors, whether that is to nurture the team, on how to provide, for example, constructive feedback, also known as criticism, conflict resolution, how they manage the team. We place a lot of emphasis on creating an environment where employees feel free to express their ideas, to come up with innovative ideas, think out of the box. So there is an environment where people should be free to speak their mind, because that's how we kind of tackle many challenging situations, and also where they feel that the organization will work with them on their areas of improvement. Because in our sector, we are counting on a loyal workforce that believes in our mission and that would want to work for this cause. So if there are areas for improvement, we try to work with the employee and develop the right attitudes. I think as a manager, having the right attitude, displaying the right leadership behaviors is actually much more important than maybe having a certain set of technical skills, because you can always have people to do those roles. But that's at an organizational level, that is one of our core values, to develop a very nurturing environment, and by sort of using coaching, mentoring, assigning a buddy that you could informally meet with. So those are some.
The interesting thing is that your industry is completely different, which is an NGO. And I would assume it's more or less a flatter organization rather than a tall structure that we have in corporates. And when you see younger millennials joining NGOs, they're up for challenges, which is good. An NGO can offer challenge. But how can you give them a career path where they're looking for a promotion every year or want to move into other places? By and large, the NGO remains the same across, except finance, HR, and all that. So how do you manage that thing? Because it's not an easy job for NGO to hold on these people.
So let me just again bust another myth in this case. So Maristop Society, for example, and there are some other NGOs as well, we are a national organization. We have regional offices in all the provincial headquarters, and then we have a management office in Karachi where we have the department heads for procurement, supply, HR, operations, strategy and research, and then we have about 400 employees overall. We do have career paths in all these respective departments, and for the young recent graduates or business graduates or from other faculties as well, We have quite a few of them, and they are joining us for the fulfilling roles that we have managed to create for them. In the development sector, as you can appreciate, there is a lot of scope to create an impact, and that at some level is very satisfying. The recent or the younger employees, they believe in the mission. They believe, they like the organization culture that provides a learning opportunity for everyone. And I think what they find very satisfying is the opportunity that is offered to see what your work results in. I think there are perhaps not many roles in which you can actually see the result of your efforts. For example, in community mobilization or marketing, as you perhaps are familiar with, yes, there is advertising for a specific brand, and the idea is to boost sales. In our case, perhaps it's the behavior change. How to wash your hands, for example, is a campaign that is well known to many, and it was supported by a corporate partner. Similarly, for encouraging people to use bird spacing, for example, it's a very difficult behavior change idea that you have to see through. And I think the young minds find it very challenging and stimulating to create a behavior change campaign that addresses such behaviors and that makes a direct contribution to the development agenda in our case.
As I see that it is an open agenda, of course, because NGOs have to work with all across all people, every walk of life, whether they're rich, poor, or every ethnic background. So that becomes a big challenge also of that. What kind of development do you provide to people to change mindsets on working with different people in different areas? Because there could be people coming to you with a certain chip on the air, because so how do you change the mindsets to people to actually, you talked about behavioral change, but what actually do you take? What kind of action do you take?
Yes, you are right, Shakeel. We have a very diverse workforce, both in terms of their professional backgrounds as well as obviously the diversity in terms of geographic areas that we work in. As an organization, and also because we are part of a global organization, we are the local implementing partners of Marie Stopes International. Across the Marie Stopes partnership, we are committed to providing a safe, respectful, and a nurturing environment to all the employees. So as part of the orientation session, in terms of how we implement it, there are several policies and several guidelines and organizational values that we provide a very detailed briefing on. It is under safeguarding as well, where rights to be treated respectfully, rights, the value of tolerance, how to disagree. We even go to that extent where we are even coaching managers to tell them how to provide constructive feedback or how to disagree. We have a zero tolerance policy in terms of any form of discrimination, and there are mechanisms, organizational mechanisms in place where there are safe call protocols, well defined and well communicated. So, for example, even a field health educator, you are all familiar, I'm sure, with the Lady Health Worker program, for example. These are community workers who are going door to door creating awareness on healthy behaviors. Now, we have a similar cadre in our organization called the Field Health Educator. So, a field health educator working in the remotest areas of Bannu or Laiya or Bahawalnagar has access to the safe call number where she can call, report her grievance, report any, if she has any complaint against a supervisor or anything, and that call is dealt with complete confidentiality, and a clear time frame is communicated to her when her concern will be addressed, and we will get back to her as to what corrective actions will be taken. So I think is implementing this culture of transparency and accountability and communicating all the organizational policies effectively right down to the grassroots level. I think that's the key.
I think you pointed out very well that behaviorism is extremely critical because it's the emotional part. So I guess only those people join who have a strong EQ or EI, emotional intelligence, because you're dealing with people and they're dealing with suffering, they have to be patient and all that. So I'm going to go a step back, and I think when you are selecting people, of course, people will join just to find a job, but of course, you will be selecting somebody who has the right fit. So looking at your development in this NGO, and also you are looking at the kind of business that you are in, and of course, it's also collection of funds as well. What kind of people are you actually looking at, and so and what kind of training did they get initially?
I think you're very right. Screening of candidates is very important. In terms of talent sourcing, our selection process includes a few things where we try to find the right fit for the organization. As part of the selection process, yes, there are technical competencies that obviously we are assessing, as any organization does. But in addition to that, there is a value clarification aspect to it. When we select candidates, there are a number of case studies that we have developed, number of scenarios, where sometimes it's kind of a written assessment, but in most cases it's a panel assessment where the candidate is given a scenario and then she discusses that with the panel. Now, these case studies have been developed very carefully, where we do want to have a sense of how the candidate would react in different situations, and if the values are aligned with the organizational values. So I think going through this methodology has really facilitated. I can't say that we are 100% screening candidates that would stay with us, but I think this has really facilitated us in identifying the right fit for the organization, because in a direct sort of just a question answer sometimes does not facilitate diving deep into certain attitudes and behaviors, but case-based, scenario-based discussion with the candidate really helps us assess.
Well, on a lighter note, who do you think are better learners, girls or boys?
Well, actually, it's interesting. Our field workers are all women because they are engaging with women at the household level. The passion that I see in them, I think it's amazing. This community health worker who studied up to 8th grade, in some cases not even 8th grade, the ownership she takes and the leadership she demonstrates in the community is remarkable and very heartwarming. Whenever there are a lot of challenges at the head office, with the donors, with the government, whenever I want to renew my energy, I go out in the field and spend time with these field workers who are all women. They are the real agents of change. And they are so empowered that they are being, they are in this role of a field health educator where they are actually making an impact in the communities. Their confidence, their resilience, their ability to take on challenges, and there are plenty in the field when they are going door to door, that is very inspiring for me. So I don't want to say who is a better learner, but I think at that level in our organization, hats off to these women who are our frontline workers and real champions of change in the society.
Absolutely. I think I've seen women in our workforce, and especially for NGOs, are more passionate. Something that I feel that they have maybe a stronger EQ or a feel for the people, because a general cultural thing. You think it is also unfortunate that a lot of people, a lot of men would think that NGOs have to be with females, or like teaching is it's not like this. And what would you say to that?
Absolutely, and I think that's another myth. So just because we are sitting in a business school and a premier business school, I just want to share that right now in the senior management, I can't say fortunately, because I think there has to be more gender balance, although I'm heading the organization, but all the department heads are males, and they are graduates of different business schools in the country. Our management staff, for example, in finance and donor reporting, we are about 43 staff, and they are all male. If you talk to them, they are taking pride in this work, and they are equally committed. I mean, these are your MBAs, your chartered accountants. Yes, we do have some communication specialists, the marketing specialists, and they find this work equally, if not more, stimulating. And when they now this year, having spent 5, 6, 7, in some cases 12 years with us, now as they reflect back when they are talking to the new recruits, they do share that when they were joining, these are people who have joined us from Philips, from Siemens, from different multinationals. And they feel that they are more fulfilled, obviously because of the social cause, but also, in terms of the functional requirements, they are the same as you would have in any multinational or in any business setup. But at the same time, I think an extra, I would say, sort of a cherry on the cake is that there is a social reward as well of making a positive change in the society.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. I think there is so much of satisfaction you get by working for people over here, and then the social help that you provide, something can be very fulfilling, and it really helps on energy in building your mainstream there wherever you're working. Okay, I'd like to open this session right now for a couple of questions. Anyone would like to ask a question? Yes. So can you please take your name before you ask the question and where you are, so we can.
My name is Saad, and I am from manufacturing industry side. So question to respected madam, since you started your career from Colgate, if I am not wrong, 25 years ago. So how was that corporate experience help you in this NGO sector? And second question is that in the society we are living, and especially the young generation who is now coming into corporate sector, they have very less tolerance and patience power. So what is the main best thing that they should develop the patience in themselves in order to achieve a good corporate career or anything what they want to do? So what would you suggest?
Thank you. I think it's a great question. Yes, I did start my career in the commercial sector, but I was not very satisfied, and I did want to work in the development sector. I think the experience, the business school training, as well as experience in the commercial sector, really helped me introduce that rigor and discipline that you learn in a business school. You see, that's why we call ourselves not an NGO, but a social enterprise. Yes, there is a social objective that we are trying to achieve, but in terms of the strategies, we do draw upon commercial market strategies. Because, for example, if we have to be successful, if as an organization, if we want to be the preferred employer for young graduates, and if we want to be sustainable, we need to have, for example, effective employee engagement that you learn in business school as well. You need to work on employee retention, how to create a nurturing workplace. Then at the same time, you need to have the systems in place that would facilitate timely decision making. You need to have the data, the market data, the research data that would inform your decisions, and you want to have the financial discipline that would enable you to move to the next level, which in our case is financial sustainability. So just to give an example, we are right now heavily dependent on international donor funding. But our strategic vision and our objective for this year is to change that proportion and to have a more diversified funding base where we are also generating self-funds that can be reinvested in our development work. In order to get there, you need financial discipline, you need a clear audit report, you also need to have accurate forecasting. So all these skills that you normally learn in a business school, these are very applicable to the development sector as well. And it brings in that professionalism that is required to run any successful setting. I'm not sure about the second part of the question, if you could kindly repeat it. I would suggest, yes, I do know that people in their students in their BBA, MBA program, they do seek internships and they do internships. We take a lot of young interns as well, from overseas as well as from business schools here. I think if you work in a social enterprise, that would teach you a lot, because that gives you perspective. A lot of students who are in business schools, many of them come from, very privileged backgrounds, and they do not have the right perspective. when these business graduates are put in the field and they are working with underserved communities, they learn a lot. And the right attitudes that you are sort of alluding to in terms of patience, tolerance, resilience, they learn these skills. These things I feel cannot be taught in a classroom. You have to have hands-on experience. You have to step out of your comfort zone, step out of your usual circle of friends, be challenged, and be put in a position where you are forced to then, sort of have introspection, clarify your values, and then think and reflect how you would act. So I think such internships would be very helpful.
And I just want to add on for that question. You said, should we react to these young people? I think young people have been always there since 1,000 years or 200 years. So it's not about just millennials. I think it's the senior people who have to shed off their aura of being there and come down to the younger people and be friendly with them. It is best if we can have young people as your mentors. That would be the best. Okay, we can talk more on that later on. But any one last question that, yes, the lady there?
When we were discussing the hierarchy of your NGO, there are certain people, I know myself personally, who are working in the NGO, and there is no such hierarchy in those NGO. So what can be the source of motivation for them? They are working on a certain position for years, but they don't have anything for their motivation, like they don't have any promotion or some incentive like thing. Moreover, they are working they have the same job description for more than a year. So they usually lose their interest by doing the same thing repeatedly. So what can be for them? After attending this session, what I can tell them for their motivation?
No, you're right. There are NGOs, just like businesses, of various sizes and scopes and funding levels. So yes, we are among sort of one of the largest NGOs in the country. But I would say that just like marketing is not a fit for every business graduate, this development sector may not necessarily be a fit for certain personality types or people who are looking for some certain aspects from their professional life that may not be catered to by the sector. But I think when we hear this term promotion, I think we have to approach it with an open mind. Working at the same management level does not necessarily mean working exactly at the same set of activities or tasks year after year. I'll give you an example. A lot of NGOs, their portfolio has different projects with set time frames. And these projects have different requirements in terms of management, in terms of their reporting, in terms of the operational focus. And each project comes with its own set of challenges and its own sets of KPIs, the key performance indicators. So there is variety there. And depending on the kind of person that one is, you may draw satisfaction from a new set of challenges, let's say, every couple of years. You may not be a manager or a senior manager necessarily, as you rightly pointed out. Certain NGOs have a flatter structure, but the challenge and fulfillment and the stimulation could be coming from different projects. And I think also we all need to take onus of our learning and development ourselves. It's not just an HR business, obviously. It's everyone's business in the organization, including the employee. So, for example, there are always opportunities for job rotation, of secondments that you need to discuss with the supervisor or with the NGO head or whoever is the relevant person, because those opportunities in itself can provide a learning ground for you, and it's not necessarily always promotion in sort of a very traditional, typical sense.
Thank you, Asma. I think you've absolutely hit the nail, because that aspect of the traditional toll structures is going away, and we are going to have flatter organizations, and promotion is no more going to be the main motivator, and learning is not going to happen just because you learn and then you get promoted. It's many different aspects that's going to occur. So absolutely, you pointed out right, that thing has to go, and so many organizations have to change accordingly. So I think it's been a very interesting discussion, especially coming from a leader of an NGO organization. I think it's sometimes very rare to actually even find someone, sitting here and talking to us from that. Usually we get corporate and bankers and from FMCGs, but it's an area which needs to be really given a lot of focus, because it does help a lot. And I think from time to time people should work in an NGO because it works a lot. And like you said, that it provides motivation, it provides satisfaction, and the challenge is how we can serve the community better. So really thank you very much for coming this afternoon and being with us.
Add one thing?
Yes, please.
I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, that we have started an undergrad program, and that is social entrepreneurship and social leadership. And when our rector, Dr. Irfan Haidar, came with this idea about 3 years ago, this is our 4th year. I was not too keen about it because I thought that the youth or the youngsters would really be more interested in going for national or multinational corporate jobs. But I was really surprised that once we started getting students into this program, and when we interviewed them, I think their motivation was to serve the society, which is good to see, because besides having those corporate profits such as Standard Chartered profit that was announced yesterday, I think it's good to see youth moving towards social sector, especially health or education. And I think a lot of them are being now employed. And an interesting aspect of this program is that 50% of the time they are in the classroom, but 50% of the time they work with NGOs and learn. It's more of a field experience that they gain. So I see a lot of scope. I hope a lot of these restrictions that have been put up by the government is removed soon, so that NGOs can do their work and can serve the society.
I think this practical learning of the students certainly helps, and those people who are really doing their entrepreneurial degree program, I'm sure they will be more passionate, and because they have got into the education and coming there. So anyway, thank you, Khalsa, for letting us also know, and it's great to see, and I think we should promote that is happening in CPM as well. But thank you very much for coming over here. So let's have a round of applause for this conference.
Thank you very much, Shakeel. Thank you very much, Asma. That was a very enlightening conversation, and something about the development sector has always been that it is something that has such a strong emotional appeal, strong emotional connect with people, that I think anybody would love to be part of the sector. So thank you very much for that. So taking the conversation forward, I would now like to, Shakeel is already here, who will be moderating the second session. I'd like to invite our panelists for the second session, and let's take this conversation forward in terms of our learning opportunities on the learning and development opportunities. So the first panelist who I'd like to invite here on stage to join us is Mr. Jalal Curamally. He's the head of HR for EFU. The second panelist is one of our mentors, our teachers, who's been with IoBM for a very long time. May I please request Shah, Saad, Husain Sahab to please join us on stage. He's the head of Saad Sahab is the head of HR for HASCOL. And the third panelist is somebody who's been at IoBM, who was part of our fraternity, and we're very happy that this is the kind of talent that we would like to showcase as well, where we have alumni who are doing things, who are going places, making things happen. So I'd like to invite Kamran Siddiqui as the third panelist. He's an IoBM alum and an HR consultant. So with that, over to you, Shakeel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, this is a very, very important topic. And in organizations, those of you who work, and there's always a tussle between the finance and the rest of the world. because they keep on saying budget nahi hai, and the budget nahi hai has been going on since 10-20 years. Mulk ke halat kharab hain, wo bhi chal raha hai. So it keeps on going back and forth, and the challenge is, of course, on the people, and they say, what happened to our development, what happened to training, and it's that thing that gets on in the organization. So we're going to learn from these three gentlemen who are here from very renowned organizations, and we will break the next hour or so into three sections. And the first section for 20 minutes, and the next 20 minutes. And 20 minutes. And each 20 minutes will include some question answers relating to that question. So the first question that I'm going to raise, I will request each member to talk about in about 3-4 minutes, sum up what they can talk, and then we'll open it to the audience for their questions. Is that okay? Are you feel comfortable? Okay, so this time round for the first section, I'll start with you. So how has the evolution of leadership or learning and development has taken place, and what are some challenges today? So what's your take on that?
In Pakistan or in my organization or in the world? Okay, I'm sorry, but in your preamble you said something and I started laughing, and the reason why I was talking to myself is because I just got my training budget for the year of but I would say, I think the first, so springing off from that, I would say that at least in my organization, that old tussle between finance, the CEO, and the head of HR about how much money for L&D we need to spend is gone. That it does not exist, and the reason why it does not exist is because there is an agreement and an alignment between HR, the CEO, and the leadership of the organization about the role of training and development in the organization, its contribution 2, 3, 4 years down the line, and the intended impact and outcome that we are monitoring in our employees and in our departments and in our branches across the country. So we're very, very, very clear on that. And I think that is more the role of the head of HR and the CEO to align the culture and the practices of the company in that direction, if it does not already exist. If the culture does not support it, then that's the role of the head of HR to do that. And I think that realization is there. You're seeing lots of heads of HR now lining up their learning and development strategies along that line. Number one. Number two, the second thing that I'm seeing is that there is a lot more understanding and adoption of alternative measures of training dissemination. There is a whole lot of e-learning going on, and there's a whole lot of subscriptions, there's a lot of foreign trips, there's a whole lot of experiential learning that is happening, and there is a little something called AI that is floating about that everybody's really excited about right now. So there is that is emerging, but to date, there has been no, and let's just be very clear here, not on the part of IBM Watson, not on the part of Google, not on the part of anyone, is there actually to date been a proper application of AI curated learning and development mechanisms right now available in the market, no matter what anybody tells you. We're seeing a lot more social media aspects coming into play. Gamification is dying, social media is working, and we're also seeing a lot more learning and development moving onto people's cell phones. So.
Let me start by saying that it's not really the size of the budget that matters, it's the size and the impact of the idea that matters. So we've come across organizations which have been transformed not because of the pumping of money into them, but because of a cause and because of an idea which is marketable socially, commercially, and in terms of the people behind that. Now, coming to this question about the challenges that we're facing, well, the real challenge which I personally feel is the alignment of what I call learning, and I want to use the word training, is the alignment of learning with the dynamism that exists today in the market. Organizations are transforming themselves. They are re-engineering and rediscovering their vision, mission, and values. And that takes us to a redesign of the organization itself, its structure. the goals, the jobs. And a job is nothing but a series of tasks which are to be performed. It's a role. And that can only be performed if the people, the job holders, have the right set of competencies. Now, because of the dynamism in the marketplace, jobs are no longer what they used to be. And the nature of competencies and the diversity of competencies in the 21st century is so deep and so wide that learning is now becoming a lifelong exercise. It is not a course, it's not a degree, it's not a title, it's not a job. It is a life of learning. So we are looking for people which have a mindset of learning and working in a learning organization. I don't want to get into too much at this first question because it will take too much time, but I'll pass.
Thank you. Great stuff said. Thank you very much. Having worked about 20 years at the corporate level, where heading as CHRO, HR head for various organizations, so the budget problems, yes, they always exist. But I couldn't agree more with what Shah Saab just mentioned, that it's not the budget, it's the idea that matters. Briefly talking about the evolution, mostly in Pakistan, I see a lot of organizations still stuck with the dilemma between learning, development, and training. So they're still struggling to understand and kind of come out of that understanding, right, and actually developing that structure of learning in their organizations. I'd restrict, as Shah Saab rightly said, I would also restrict my views on learning and development side. I think it's the best challenge that I see is, and putting it in a nutshell, it's marrying your organization design with your learning design. And that's the biggest challenge right now, right? Because as the time is passing by, it's more about individual experience and giving each individual a learning experience, because the exposure is such that one size fits all wouldn't work. So we compose a competence, and in that competence there are certain list of behaviors and skills, etc., and we expect one training course to address everybody's needs, which is not possible, right? Because the kind of exposure everybody's going through, it's tremendous, it's phenomenal. So that is the single biggest challenge for HR people and the leadership. When I say design, marrying the two designs, which is organizational and learning, I would say that it is the job of the HR head and the leadership team to actually really articulate what is it that they want to deliver right at the end. So we are focusing not on the process efficiency, which is man days, etc., etc. We are actually focusing on the impact that needs to be created. So impact creation is what the future of learning would be about. Provision of learning, provision of development right at the outset where the activity is happening, not in the classroom really, right? Because that's where it's more effective. And the tools and trades like they were just mentioned, they're enabling that. So yeah, that's how I would put it.
Thank you. I think all of you have made a very strong point, no doubt about it. And you talked about that HR is the main driver. And that's absolutely true, because it's the HR's role. If you have the wrong HR, or the person who is very operational and not into culture or development or people development, the organization moves on operationally as well. And of course, it's the CEO and the HR that go hand in hand. And I think, Saad, you certainly mentioned about the idea, because I think what the flow is now, it's the same 20, 30 years ago, the principle was that it's not about classroom training. It's a 70-20-10 approach. And 70%, you'll be surprised, is on the job. So leaders have to put in their time, put in their effort of training and guiding people on the job. And that's the whole idea, where you don't need the budget, you don't need any money. And 20%, can you guess what it is? What's 20% balance? Is it learning or classroom training? E-learning or what? It's all about reading books and e-learning. And the last 10% is actually the classroom training. So what happens, and I'd like to move on to Kamran, what he said about that specific training for specific people are required. And what's happening in the organization, which he rightly said, is a tick box. Because what they want to show is that we've done 3 programs from great programs done. Communication, people that need communication. So I speak English or speak Urdu, and interpersonal skills are very good. Why am I going there? So that is the Kamran, can you see this is going back and forth actually? Okay. Okay. So the fact is that you need to say your name, please, where you're working, and I would request and prefer to ask a question and not to make it, because or anyone.
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Noman and currently I am heading training function at Siddiqui. We recently completed the project of e-learning at our company, and we are facing a challenge of adaptability in it. Like e-learning is not the exact replacement of classroom learning, but unless or until it's a time-effective and cost-effective solution of learning. So how can we enhance the adaptability of e-learning at any workplace?
Okay, is your question specific to any gentleman or anyone can answer?
Anyone can answer.
So enhancing learning on e-platform, that's what the question is, right? So one is, very quickly, what I suggest is e-learning, why we have to understand why are we doing that, right? Is this just to save cost, or is there actually a purpose behind doing it? Correct? So talk about generations coming from PS4s and PS3s and think aloud, right? Why would they sit on a dumb screen and actually would want to go through the text when the same thing could be done in much more exciting way, adapting to 10 different perspectives on YouTube perhaps? So these are the kind of questions that one has to answer. So landing people on e-platforms need to have a purpose behind them, right? And you got to really think through what exactly are you wanting to deliver when you're talking about e-learning space in your organization. So not necessarily that investing the kind of cost that you're investing, you end up saving money in the long run. You may end up actually not doing so and compromising on your learning objectives also, right? So landing in this, so to summarize it, my take would be that make it exciting, make it just not to the e-learning platforms like we just mentioned, that it's on the go. You got to make sure that it's the second, third generation. Talk about AI delivering lectures, AI coaches, and it is going to a different level. Yes, it may not be as mature today, but tomorrow it could be. So we have to keep up with the changing pace, right? That's what is important.
Just another point came across my mind. It's not just e-learning. What you are trying to develop is a learning ecosystem, and that involves a complementary set of tools along with just e-learning. But again, that depends on what kind of roles you have in mind. What is the purpose behind it? And what is the learning mix that you want? And therefore, what is the tools of learning that you would employ? So don't get hung on fashion. It fades, right?
I'm sorry, I am an e-learning skeptic. I have been an e-learning skeptic for the last 10 years that I've been looking at it. I have seen it fail multiple times. There are certain core elements to e-learning that I feel where it will always fail. There's no purpose for it existing beyond, oh, we'll save money. Number two, the very word e-learning is a misnomer. It's an oxymoron. It's not e-learning, it's e-training. If you're using it as an e-training, you're doing it wrong, you're wasting money, don't do it. E-learning, in my view, works best not when it's shoved down the employee's throat, but when there is a good enough reason for the employee to be there and to engage with the course content. For example, and I won't take the name, but this very famous MNC FMCG, you were not eligible to go for a foreign training if you did not first complete certain company mandated e-learning courses. तो होता ये था कि course on होता था, the server would be busy tracking और लोग employee rec room में ping pong खेल रहे, table tennis चल रही होती. I've seen this with my own eyes. That's not a good enough reason for the employee to be there. But if, again, it comes down to why does this thing exist in my organization? What value does this add to me as an employee? If you can answer, there's a very simple question. One of my teachers taught me, Jalal, whatever you do in HR, you must always answer this one question from the company's perspective and from the employee's perspective. What goes of my father? In very blunt terms. So if you can answer that, make it personal for the employee, it benefits me in some way, it impacts me in some way, the culture supports it. There is a very real reward in it for me that's not linked to foreign courses or the money or my promotion, but to my professional development. Then yes, perhaps just maybe you have been able to successfully position e-learning correctly in an organization and you have a better than 10% chance of success, in my view.
Thank you. Yes, any second question? Yeah, just last question and then move to the next section. And please state your name and where you work.
I am working as an professional at Petroleum. So, my question is that commitment from top management does matter, but the main thing is the learning attitude. And changing attitude takes years and years. So the role of HR, besides doing filtration and talent sourcing, what else role HR can play in changing the attitude and making the attitude as a learning attitude?
Okay, that's a very good question. And this question, please park it for the next section because that's exactly what we're going to do, is that we lead into the second section. Please do ask again, how do we overcome the challenges that we're facing? One of the challenges that he has pointed out, learning, and of course, the pressure from the organizations to get in more budget, to get the growth done, no time, more competitors coming in, and the fast-paced economy, or should I say the fast-paced business in a low economy, and everybody trying to be a cutthroat. So those are the challenges, and plus, as you mentioned about the AI coming. So what's your thought on how to overcome the challenges today?
I would defer to experience here, and so with your permission then. In my experience, and I can only speak from my own personal experience, competition, and perhaps this is the coincidence of my own career, but what I have seen is that competition, tough economic times have not been depressors of learning, they have been accelerants and catalysts of learning, not training, learning. So whenever we've seen tough economic times, that I have been fortunate in my career, learning and development became key parts of turnaround strategies. Learning and development, cultural change across the company, because essentially change or die, adapt and survive. So I've been fortunate, perhaps it's been the coincidence of my career, and therefore this is the lesson that I have learned as a professional, is that you do learning and development because times are tough, because you need to change, because the curve is very steep and you need to stay ahead of it. It's not a question of culture, it's a question of survival and adaptability. And I've been fortunate enough to work with CEOs, with directors, even with boards who understood that very clearly and very succinctly. However, which is why I wanted to bow towards experience here. If you could add, because I'm coming from a very different perspective.
Well, I don't know why you're saying you're disagreeing with me. You're not disagreeing with me at all, actually. Great, wonderful. Well, I mean, why do we learn? We learn to perform, right? It's very simple. And performance in the organizational context is basically of two types. One are those physical, commercial, gettable targets for the organization, which are quantitatively handed down with KPIs and stuff, and on which the survival of the organization depends, and the department, and in fact to a degree the individual as well. But on the other hand, there's a larger, longer, deeper context to performance, and that's the behavioral side. And I'm not talking of good manners or character, I'm talking of professional behavior. So every job requires a certain type of behavior, attitude on the job. The learning that we do should address both these segments. The competencies required to do the job, which is the what part of the job, what is to be done. and the competencies required to actually do the job correctly, which is the how part of doing the what. So I'm talking about learning in both areas, the core competencies as well as the behavioral part of the job. And there has to be, in my humble opinion, a linkage between performance management and learning. And you know, performance management leads to rewards. And what you guys are so particular about, careers, for the time being at least. So we've got to make sure that learning leads to accomplishment of targets and accomplishment of competencies which are behavioral, and the rewards are linked to that as well. So that's a conceptual approach. Most organizations will just reward people on the targets that they achieve, but not on the competencies that they develop for themselves individually and for the organization and for the future. So the organization is for the future. People die, organizations should not. And there has to be a continuity, a continuum of talent and competency in the organization, which means developing and getting rewarded for that learning. So I approach it quite differently in that sense.
Right. So, Shakeel, if I recall, the question and the subject was around AI's intervention also. Challenge. Right. So I think some great contribution there. So without getting too much into that, rightly said that it's about creating an event versus impact. Organizations last, right? So what are we there for? Learning, as rightly said, it is about enabling the future. And more the challenges, more the opportunities. It's just about how we keep the momentum going. It's the leadership, the direction, the culture. It all comes there. But how we make it happen, the challenge comes in the how part today, because technology is actually making it more efficient, more robust, and actually keeping up with the pace. A pace of change becomes easier if we are technology enabled. So specifically talking about the subject of AI, there's some great stuff happening, and this learning would evolve. The role of learning in HR would evolve into actually coaching probably, or training or designing AI to be a better teacher, right? And that's a challenge that probably HR people may have to face in the very short span of time, that it's just not designing learning for the organization, but actually translating that into the AI language and actually be a teacher to the teacher, because that's eventually where the technology would end, if not today, tomorrow, day after. So just building upon, and not to be getting into what is already said, I'm just touching upon a specific subject, because technology is inevitable. It would hit us, and it would hit us very, very soon. One more part was about creating value. Learning is about creating long-term value. If you're not challenge would be just going back on the drawing board and actually redesigning where is the value. Is it event or is it impact? And largely, and I would not would not hesitate in accepting the fact that HR fraternity for the longest time has failed to prove any benefit around or quantify the benefit around learning and development or training as such in the boardrooms. So the one thing that they would not be able to justify is the kind of expense through matrices and financial impacts, or so on and so forth. And as time is passing by, these things are becoming more concrete, more questioned, and so on and so forth. That's be a challenge in the future as well, and a greater challenge in the future as well. So yeah, I mean, technology is one side that I see as a challenge, and for HR people to actually move very quickly in that direction. Please, thank you.
Thank you. I think quite valuable. One thing we talked about, and Jalal was just learning, the differentiation between that. Now, training is something that, of course, you train people on. And learning, you don't have to put them in the classroom to train. You can learn anywhere. You can have a diverse workforce. You can work in a wonderful organization. You can have a wonderful boss, and you will learn. You can learn from just discussing with some junior person with your kids, and that's all about learning. And that's why when we talked about the 70-20-10 scheme, that's exactly what the professionals have been talking about, 70% on the job. You learn, and that the training is basically how you can even adapt to that learning. And as pointed out on the how part. So, and I'm suggested was there was a suggestion. How many of you really understand the meaning or the difference between training and learning? How many of you can say that? Any? Show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So anyone would like to?
I've been an HR professional for 14 years. I still struggle with that distinction.
Okay.
So for those of you who have raised your hands, if you could explain it to me.
Anyone would like to answer? Okay. We have one answer and then let's see. It's a struggle to really find out. Okay.
The issue is take about how much time we usually require. There are several dimensions in learning and teaching or training. Number one, who is the primary person in focus? So training is something in which the trainer will be sitting in the, standing in the middle, and everyone will be focusing. Learning will be an environment where each learner is himself or herself enabled in working in that environment. That's the structural part of it. There are so many other parts of it also. It also deals with the learning also is self-paced versus training, which is more lesson plan based. And I can go on and on with my subject.
Okay, no, thanks a lot. Again, I think that is a tough question to ask, no doubt about it. Because every time you train people on Excel or PowerPoint, they're actually learning also. So you're actually training. But then, the fact is, that is of course you will learn a new thing whenever it happens. But it can go without the classroom. And that is why these how you behave. And I think Asma also was pointed out.
Okay. You see, once upon a time, when Excel used to come, it used to come with a huge manuals, and there were used to be training programs. Today, there are no training programs. You see, you log into Excel, and Excel teaches you itself. So that's the change we are talking in an organization. And if if you think about the learning organization that Peter Sanjay talked about, then the various components on it should become available whenever there is a need for someone to learn something. So when we go on a particular icon, we click the right button and it can tell you about whatever options are there and what possibilities are there. So we need to, so the environment that I envision in a learning organization would be something where whenever there is a need to do particular thing, all possible options will become available.
Thank you. The gentleman who asked the question in the last section, has your question been answered, or you still haven't got an answer? We'd like to put it to the gentleman.
My question is being answered partially. The second part of my question is that how to change the attitude, as changing attitude takes years. One way of doing it is to filter it during the talent sources, but it's not give you 100% results.
Yes.
So how you may change the results? You may keep trainings, but if one individual hasn't a learning mind, so how you can change it?
Yes, that's a very, very good question. So, and I know all of you have the same challenge, and it's nothing new. It's always there. How do you change the attitude?
Number one, don't hire that person. Don't hire. Just don't hire. However, you see, human beings don't exist in isolation, and neither do their mindsets and perceptions. HR's role is to ensure that if it is a part of the company's culture, that employee that you have just hired is walking into a pre-existing environment. That's why we have probation periods. The longer the probation period, the better. It takes time for cultural acclimation. And as he or she witnesses the benefits of adopting a learning attitude, they will become more client in the future. HR, as long as you maintain that culture, in my experience, human beings will adapt to the environment around them. However, I say this with one caveat. Culture is like rain. It comes from top to bottom. If there is a problem at the top with regards to training, learning, and development, then that gentleman who does not have a training attitude at the bottom will never change his attitude, and it does not matter what you do.
Well, I think attitudes can be changed. It's not that they are cast in stone. But you need a leader. And the leader who is able to inspire others. Leadership means followership. So if you have managers who are not traditional managers, but who can inspire others towards learning and towards changing attitudes, and that requires a lot of self-discipline, personal competencies, human psychology, and above all, a commonality of cause. The best leaders are those who can teach others to follow a cause and sacrifice for that cause. And the best managers are those who can team people for a particular cause and inspire them. And I have a whole new approach towards management, which I'm sure none of you will agree, but I will say it at a later time in the next question.
I think very well said, Sasa, because the fact is that attitude to be changed is really come from within and also from a good leader and the entire environment. So it's not very easy, and it's a pattern that comes from your own behaviorism throughout your life, how it be, how attitudes can shape. But the challenge does come when you hire the right person and he has the right attitude and slowly goes down because of any learning. And it can be because of the leader, because of the culture, because of the organization. Any other question? Yes, please.
Picking up what you said, my name is Farooq Sheikh. I'm running my own consulting firm for the last 5 years. My question is, picking up from your comments regarding the ability of HR leaders to convince the board or the management team about the value for the change. So, I've recently conducted a workshop on customer sensitivity, which is now top of the town, and value creation process is part of that. Unfortunately, my profound humbleness, it's hard to visit the organization is considered most of the organization, not to please don't take my comment in a negative sense. It's considered as a sacred cow. They don't connect with people within the organization, in the majority of the organization. And that's why people are afraid to talk to them. Like if an employee gets a call from GMHR, suddenly the fear arises, why is being called? So that's the leadership role which HR functions.
And that is exactly what they're saying, that Jalal also said, HR is the key driver. So if you have an operational HR, like a GM HR who doesn't get out of the room, it's detrimental. So any question?
Yes, related to that question, so as an HR fraternity, like in terms of connecting with the board functional or the grassroots level team, what would you advise to the younger HR people who are about to join in that fraternity? How should they build up on that perspective?
Any particular gentleman that you want to ask the question? Anyone. I'll take an answer from one gentleman, whoever it is.
Shah is my teacher as well. I've studied industrial marketing in IBA way back in '92 from him.
I'm still learning.
So I'm a learner for life.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, so the question is how HR can become more people friendly, right? I think HR is a cause, it's not a job. Just like Asma is working for a cause. And only those people should dare to go into HR who are willing to develop people and who are willing to work with people and work for people. Now take the case of performance management. Performance management was previously misconstrued as appraisal. Appraisal is a very small part of measuring performance. It's not performance management. Performance management is the positive side of HR. It's not the negative side. You're looking at developing a person, you're looking at building a career, you're looking at enabling the person with competencies to do better in the job, in life, in economics, and so on and so forth. So the whole approach to HR has to change. The tools to HR have to change. The engagement and the hierarchical distance between an employee and the supervisor and the HR person has to change. So my advice to the younger generation, those who want to go into HR, you shouldn't look at promotions, you should look at becoming a savior, becoming a coach, becoming a teacher, and following the life of the greatest prophet that ever existed. So it's a different ball game altogether. Having said that, I've seen organizations where HR is now leading organizational strategy, and HR heads are becoming CEOs. So those organizations have got it right, because who delivers the results by using the other assets of finance and plant and equipment and machinery? It's the people. And if you're not a good HR manager, as a manager, you're bloody well not a manager. The first three letters of a manager are M-A-N. There's no discrimination, right? Also women. So if you can't manage people, you're really not a manager. You may be as good a accountant or salesperson or whatever you are, but it's really handling people and getting work and making the vocation a vacation. You understand what I'm saying?
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Namra Khalid and I'm working in Navina Exports. That's basically textile sector. So being associated with that particular sector and being working in an environment which is labor intensive, my question is that we as a country yet now is in the businesses which are very, very labor intensive. For example, taking the production houses. And if we talk about the non-management staff of any company, they are never taken in the idea of the learning and development, neither by themselves nor by the higher management ever. So how crucial is it for them to learn the things, the labor staff exactly to be, and how we have to change the ideology of the management as well, that these are the people who also need some sort of learning and development.
Thank you very much. We'll take the first part of the question. Second part actually leads into the third section. Okay. So the first is, how much importance do you feel that these non-management staff or the unionized people should be taken into the company strategy, and how should be they developed, and so on and so forth? Anyone?
Yeah, so it is equally important. How is the challenge? Typically in our culture, where such things are not mature. There are other countries where it's mandated. There are employee councils. They have representation from the laborers, etc., who actually contribute into strategy and decision making. US is one of the countries that actually does that, and they have labor council and so on and so forth. So it is very much needed. Learning development is equally needed, but the way it's structured and has evolved over a period of time in Pakistan, it's kept at a distance for various reasons, for various unfortunate reasons, I would say. But history is a witness. History witnesses that there are people who have come from that sector and actually have made it to the CEOs and whatnot of the organization, right? So talent exists at any level. It's about identifying them and providing the opportunities. Unfortunately, yes, at this point in time, there are very few organizations that I know of that actually have that kind of structure and that kind of approach towards developing talent at that level. And I didn't find talent at that level, but not many, unfortunately. And that's a gap that I think as a leadership, corporate leadership, one has to address.
One question I want to ask, leading from that question, the organized or opinion. Same sort of thing. In some companies there could be, and some companies. idea, or is it their own initiative, do you think? What is it?
I would not want to comment on behalf of society, but I agree with Kamran Saad, and I accept responsibility for my own organization. It's not formalized. But to say that we don't care about the career progression of our non-management and of our non-officer staff is also not incorrect. There are multiple cases in my organizations of people who started out in my company as peons and jokidars who are now either situated in the head office with 5-figure, 6-figure salaries, or are heading branches and doing sales right now. So it's not as though we don't care. To our shame, it's not formalized. That I will admit. But to say that we do not have those doors open for our people is incorrect. We do. There are certain conditions, however, that do need to be met, unfortunately. As more and more, I mean, for the lady who asked the question, she's in manufacturing, it's actually easier for you to do it. I'm in financial services. The barrier for entry in my organization is much higher. We are knowledge workers. We do not have a work in process inventory or machinery or plant. And SECP requires a certain level of education and then post-education training before you can go and sell a financial product. Yet these people do it. We have certain policies, procedures, and pathways for people to move up those ladders. I feel we need to do a better job of identifying these people and then helping them move up the ranks.
Yeah, I think it's also an organizational culture thing. I worked in Indus Motor, Toyota company for 9.5 years, and we never had this problem. Obviously, that culture had a formalized culture of addressing all tiers of workers. And there was a strong belief in not top-down, but also a bottom-up approach towards ideas and solutions, and it was all formalized, like Kaizen. I won't go into details. And then you had Muda, which is reducing waste, and then you have Genchi Genpatsu. By the way, that is gali wali nahi, a Japanese word. And that had another way of working. Then you had Heijunka, which is stabilized production using the lower classes of workforce. If you call it, we used to call them team members. We never even called them workers, right? So it's a cultural thing, and I agree it has to be formalized. And organizations like ours should also focus on them. They are the workhorses. They are the people who deliver the real output, actually.
So let's move on to the third section. Yes, please.
To the young lady who asked this question, thank you. You've got my mind working on this. And I guess the answer to your question is simply this. Do you think your organization should have this? A pathway for the junior people to move up? If you do, go do it.
Okay, all right, fine. The last section is really on, we talk about a lot of good ideas. There's a lot of suggestions and innovative ways that we can find out about imparting training or learning sessions, and this is what we can do for our culture and leader. How can we drive it? When we actually try to think about it, then there are many obstacles. How can we drive? Because what's the takeaway for this audience when they go back home and they say, okay, let's start doing this, or they just heard a session. So what do you take and what would you suggest how to drive it onwards?
I don't think this is a horse that needs a direction. We're all on this horse, and I think the last 10-15 minutes of the early 10-15 minutes of this panel have proven conclusively it's gonna change. I think what is needed is direction. You could just point it in a certain way because it isn't something that needs driving. However, it is something that needs direction. It needs an organization specific, strategy aligned, company approved outcome a target that you are now going to go and hit using that momentum. The momentum is there. not just in terms of technology or in terms of pedagogy, course content, everything that is coming up in training, or the channels through which learning is being embedded below certain grades and above certain grades in the organization, not just formally by HR, but informally by social media and all the other technologies. I also think it's being driven by the people that are entering HR today. I'm the oldest person in my team. The second youngest person in my team is under the age of 30. Under the age of 30. That's how large the management gap in HR is right now. You young people entering HR, working in HR, are almost at an average a decade or so removed from your nearest manager or from your departmental head. That is a significant gap in ideation, policy formulation, practice adoption. But the energy and the drive that I see in the young, in the people coming out, and I think Nasser also mentioned EFU Life is one of the top 10 recruiters of CPM today, so we do recruit a lot of CPM people. And what we see, I think that more than anything else is something to be really excited about. We white-haired suits will sit down and talk about strategy, ideas, principles, practices, and organizational objectives. But I think what will really drive whatever change is coming, because it's coming, whatever really drive it home are the young professionals that are entering the teams today. So,
you made a good point, and also you said that he said some time back is change or die, do or die. So what happens is that if you don't catch on the bus on the right time, you'll miss the bus, and the change will happen, and it will just move on. But the challenge, thanks a lot for sharing those thoughts, and I'd like to move on to Saad. Now, who is the main driver? Of course, he said HR, but how can we really make that happen before we lose time?
It's also been said that the leaders of the organization, the management is responsible, HR is responsible, and so on. They may be responsible, but I think that the driver is the supervisor, is the manager himself. And this manager is a totally different animal, if I may use that word. Managers heretofore rely on authority, on title, on power, on scope of jurisdiction, right? I'm talking of a different role of a manager. A manager has to be a coach. He has to empower people with knowledge, skills, and attitudinal changes. He has to create a learning environment in which he becomes the centerpiece, the coach. And he has to delegate a lot of work down to his team. So the real manager would be a real coach, in that he will just give guidance when needed. He will not be looking over the shoulder, and he will not be creating an atmosphere of pressure or panic. He's a coach. He will give guidelines, he will give a direction, and he will give an overall target. In fact, I believe managers should not even give targets. They should leave it to their own teams to develop their own targets. So this coach, and if you look at cricket perspective, and that's an example I can quote, the difference between a captain and a coach. The captain gives directions. तुम शॉर्ट लेग पे आ जाओ, अगला बॉल बाउंसर होना चाहिए, तीसरा यॉर्कर होना चाहिए. And what does the coach do? He teaches, he coaches. He is available 365 into 27 into 7. He has no hierarchical distance with the subject. He does not share authority. He shares knowledge, he shares skills, he shares attitudinal changes. And he will sit with the person whom he is coaching without these distances. And he will train them, and he will ensure learning, and he will move away. Right? So the world of management is changing from hierarchy and authority to learning, and to empowering, and to delegation, and to consensus in team building. Consensus requires dilution of authority. respect for other opinion. So the structure of organizations is going to change, and I predict that in the next 10 years you will have managers without titles. You will have flatter structures, you will have multitasking managers, you will have the intellectual capital of the 21st century managing in a different way. Unfortunately, we don't realize that this is the same way of the Orient. Let that sink in. जो आपका जो रोड साइड पे जो मैकेनिक है उसका जो सबऑर्डिनेट है वो सबऑर्डिनेट उसको क्या कहता है? उस्ताद. It's in our DNA, it's in our culture. So management is all about learning. Management is all about coaching. There are no bosses, there are no managers, there have to be coaches. And we as a nation and we as part of our society respect the most after our parents, who are our biological parents. We respect most who teach us, who coach us. They are our professional parents. So managers have to transform their attitudes and their whole role as coaches, professional coaches and professional parents to their people. That's my take on this. And if they do that, it will be a learning organization, learning ecosystems, no boundaries. Are you ready for that?
Thank you. Jalal Saab and Shah Saab, some great points added there. Just building upon what's being said, to me it would be whether coach is doing that or it's driven from the people who are coming in. It's about challenge interaction would be towards individualizing learning experience for HR and the leadership. Who will be driving it? I don't really agree, or I don't really, in my own humble way, do not take or would not want HR to take the complete onus of I'm driving it. And that's what actually has happened over a period of time, that HR has always said, oh, main karunga, ya media authority. The idea is behind coaching is that, people who can do it, partnering, going out, networking, and actually creating an agile environment, right, where the organization is a learning organization. Anybody and everybody is able to learn, and creating that environment with leadership. That's important. When you talk about individualizing experiences, that connects with the kind of people who are coming in, because today when you talk to millennials and the Generation Z, you tend to understand that they have a very entrepreneurial mind. Their preferences change very quickly. They are very exposed. They don't want to be stuck with a particular kind of job and a particular kind of experience for a very long time, right? But take it or leave it. But people like us would fade out, and that's the reality. And that such a workforce is there and is already taking charge. And that's what the challenge of learning and development would be, to actually maintain their interest in our organization or the organization that we're working for. And that's where individualizing the learning experience and knowing your people, which actually comes to different behavioral mindsets and understanding your people better. It's just like, I often talk to people that we did a 360, and it's very interesting, but it's just like, you took somebody's BP a year back and you're trying to treat it now after 365 days or whatever months, right? Would it really help? It's an obsolete concept, right? So you got to individualize the experience for on daily, weekly, whatever basis, that if people are engaged and contributing to the organization learning. And that would be a challenge for the leadership of the organization at large, because connecting those individual needs with the strategy and with what the organization has to deliver at the end of the day would be a challenge and a half for organization. That's where coaching would actually play a great role, in my opinion. And that's where it is mandatory to have. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great answers, because it's not just about HR only driving, but it's in fact about facilitating. That's what we call partnering, and that's what we call how you can really share the burden of the entire culture. Okay, any questions? A couple of questions, please. Yes? And you're next.
Hello?
Yes,
my name is Abdul Momin. I'm working in ICAP in Overseas Coordination Department. So my question is a bit different from all the discussion. My question is basically, we see that in major big organizations, the senior management, can you hear me?
Can you please speak up in the mic?
Hello?
Yes.
Okay. We see that in very major organizations, the senior management, the senior managers and the directors, they go on international trips, trainings and workshops, and majorly the conferences. So my question is, when they come back, they are very, they have very productive discussion in the industry that they are working, the company that the industry it is based in. So they have very attractive and motivating discussions overseas. But when they come back, how do they basically convey the message and train their employees, their lower staffs, and convey the thoughts they had over there, the discussions over there, to the employees? Like, is there a procedure? Are there any certain steps they take? My question is basically specifically to each of the organization that you.
Okay, I'll just leave it to one person because we in interest of the time.
See, this is literally learning sharing, right? So there could be many ways. It could be somebody's coming in from an international exposure, or a training or a conference. There are various organizations having different processes. They could have decoding sessions. They have train the trainer sessions, the learning transfer sessions, and so many other ways, right? So there's no specific terminology, I would say, for it. But yes, in many organizations, learning transfer sessions both there. But that one important element to understand here is your organization a learning-driven organization? That's critical, because a lot of times you just send people out for as a reward replacement and to retain them, right? कि उसको बाहर की training करा लिया हमने. But the intent is not really to give a exposure or bring certain learning back, and that's where the learning process stops. वो नहीं होना चाहिए. I think if that answers your question.
I think there's no learning procedure or a system or a structure. It only depends on people. Just gather people and ask it to impart the training session. Of course, 7 days in the Bahamas or Boston University cannot be replicated here. And then you take them to PSTD or CBM, or then you say, let's train our people. So it's not going to work out. But nevertheless, it has to be fun.
My point basically was that, just to clear, my point was that the learning they had over there, when they come back to their own company, how do they convey the message to the whole organization?
You see, there's no process. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So there's only one formal way, which is the opposite, which is part of learning organization. The opposite is organizational learning, right? Unfortunately, Pakistan में organizational learning systems हैं नहीं, they are basically designed in a special way to actually capture experiences and organizational learning, people learning in certain ways, in certain systems, so that others could utilize those, or others could actually make use of those, that knowledge generated by various contributors, right? But unfortunately, organizational knowledge mechanics यहाँ पर ज़्यादा operate करते नहीं हैं, जहाँ पर organizations ने experience भी नहीं किया, not even MNCs if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yes, just a minute. There was a question waiting from the last days, and we'll just have one more question. That's anyone from here? You want to? No, I think we'll do the new one. Just one question that we have in the interest of time. We do have some refreshment, I guess, so we can. Yeah, we told there's some refreshments, so you can join us and any one of the speakers here, and you can ask questions. So, okay, one or second question. All right. Yes.
My name is Arsalan Mare.
And make it the question very crisp.
Yes, I'm currently working in K Electric in the internal audit department. My question is, I'm personally leading a team where I have finance trainees who are eager to learn. They are always asking questions and want to learn new things. Plus, since KE was a government organization before, there are old employees. They've been in the organization for ages. They are seeing the new blood going ahead, and they are still, they are way back. Now they have to report to managers that are 10 to 15 years younger than them. They are eager now to learn, seeing this gap. But the top management, they believe that you cannot teach old dogs new tricks. So what is your experience, according to your experience, what would you suggest that every organization has 45 to 50 and 50 plus, they have still years left to give to the organization, but do you think learning and development for them is essential or not?
This is not an issue. This is any organization, and it's not today. It's been. Who would like to answer this?
in my previous job, I was a management consultant, so we worked on some very large public sector transformations for State Bank, for SSGC. So this is something that I'm PTCL, and this is something that I've had first-hand experience with. And in all three organizations, whether it was under the Egyptian gentleman who headed PTCL or under Dr. Ishrat, who was at the time the governor of the State Bank when the State Bank was transforming, the through line was very clear. The entity exists for a reason. He said two things. Entities exist to achieve a certain purpose. In our companies, or even like K Electric, yes, K Electric was created by legislature, but you have a profit incentive. You are a profit-seeking entity, you are not an adult learning center. So if an organization is spending its resources on its employees, creating a learning environment, providing training, etc., there is an intended benefit that the entity expects to receive at the end of the day. Number one. Number two, you start from the basis, and here is where I challenge the premise that your managers are telling you. The top man at SSGC, at State Bank, and at PTCL said everybody, irrespective of whether they were coming in from the private sector or their career bureaucrats who are coming in off the 21 grade government structure, can potentially contribute to the organization. These people should be placed in jobs or in departments or in processes where they can make the best possible contribution and then trained up. Not trained horizontally, trained vertically, so that they can grow within that very thin vertical slice of the company and still make a contribution, even if it is very limited. And that was the strategy that was followed. Both in SSGC and in State Life, and to some extent in PTCL, although PTCL ran two parallel organizations for a while and then slowly phased those people out. So that is the other alternative strategy that you can take, is not to train them but to phase them out. But the successful strategy that I would point you towards is the one that Dr. Ishrat applied at State Bank. He identified vertical slices within the organization wherein certain people, irrespective of their junior or their seniority, could potentially contribute, and then train them up to do that. So it's not a question of that you can't treat an old dog new tricks, but then you must also understand why your management says that. Training, learning, ultimately is also measured in rupees. Funding is limited and training competes with other organizational priorities to achieve their share of funding. The company will look to maximize the utility for its spend. However, you create that utility by creating organizational benefit, which is what Dr. Ishrat did. I hope that helps.
Indeed, every company will have its own platform. So we would like to end here. Guess the time is over. We are having some tea outside, so please do come over and ask any questions to any one of us. We're all here. I think life has always been like this. Nature provided us this planet. Men and women have learned how to eat and to cook and to make houses. Nobody trained them. They learned because there was an environment. So when an organization creates an environment which is full of culture, great leaders, and as they pointed out, teachers and coaches and mentors who will automatically blend in with new people and old people, the learning will happen. And that is the crux of the organizations. And with the process, the digitalization comes in. So give that opportunity to the people, and people will learn. So I'd like to thank my guests here for being here, Jalal, Saad, and Kamran as well. And thank you very much, and the audience, for listening to us. Thank you.
Exactly 12 and a half minutes more. Let's count. Before the vote of thanks by Mr. Talib Karim, I would like to ask Patron of the Alumni Association and Rector IoBM, Dr. Irfan, to do the conclusion of the session.
So I think after such a interesting is really while they were speaking, while they were speaking, there were two things that were going through my mind. One was connecting the dots with the transition of the old Excel to the new Excel where there are no manual. And if there are manuals, they are just tool tips or some tips that are offered at. The second were the thinking or the basic outline of a learning organization as Peter Sinjay outlined. So the few things that I have learned from this is how can we integrate the two models that I was forming in my mind and connecting one with the another, is an organization whose systems thinking is embedded in the various actions that take place at various processes. And that in a way are the various flows that you see in an Excel worksheet. And secondly, the shared vision and the personal mastery will help you in moving from one process and delving down to the most detail that you would like as you do it in Excel. So in Excel, you have the capacity to drill down and to explore those hidden features which people often who have been working for tens of years may not have explored. And that's very true with a learning organization and with learning itself, unlike a training where there is a particular thing that needs to be covered, a curriculum or an outline that needs to be covered. The learner has the ability to drill down in the area that learner is more comfortable and interested in, to the level of detail that he has the capacity to So those were the two things. I think it was very interesting to me as I was developing the two analogies together and trying to bring them together. And it was a scintillating and a wonderful expression, especially what Mr. Shah mentioned about, and that resonated with many of the things I typically am also thinking about the role of the manager as a leader, as a learner, coming down to the level of the people and helping them and enabling them to move up the ladder. And especially the system thing that Jalal Saab talked about in developing, slicing the organizations into various verticals. That's a very interesting way to look at the division with the people with their own limitations and shortcomings, enabling them to rise up. And of course, Mr. Shakeel, Mapara and Kamran Saab contributing in various other parts of the things that I have just mentioned. Thank you very much, EMAC and Alumni Association for arranging this session.
4 minutes gone. Talib Saab, vote of thanks, please.
Thank you very much for being here. I think personally I have a long association with at least 3 of the individuals sitting here. Jalal, yes, we have known each other for a few years now, but Adnan, of course, long time, almost over 20 years. He was part of our second batch, or first batch actually, 1995. So the new emblem that you see was just designed by D. Hamidi, and we have just launched it yesterday, and this would be a 25-year celebration. Shah Saad Husain Saab have been teaching here for a very, very long time. I think many of you and many of the corporate people sitting here had the honor of being a student, whether here or at IBA, and now they are HR leaders in various organizations. Of course, Jalal, a young HR head, and we have been working with EFU now as an institute for a few years now. Shakeel, again, a very long association. I've known him while he was at ATU at that time, and has been very IPA biased, but I'm trying to change him now and trying to bring him here. Asma, thank you very much. It was a pleasure meeting you. I think, as I've said earlier, that our focus is towards development sector, and I hope that your organization and our institute can work together, because we have worked in that sector with USAID and other organizations for many years, and I think we have some very productive partnership in this sector. Thank you, Farhan, for organizing this on the Grammy. And I think for any institution, education institution, alumni is the backbone. Alumni, I mean, without them, if you look at North America, Europe, anywhere else, most of the endowment comes from alumni, and they keenly participate in various activities. So we have started doing that from this year, actually from last year, and I hope that our alumni like Mapara and others will play an important role in helping this institution go forward and be one of the best. Thank you very much for being here, and it's a Saturday, I know it's a family time, but thank you for spending time with us. Thank you.